Welcome back. In this lesson, we're going to talk about casual speech. Now, you might already be familiar with casual speech, but here's a review. Casual speech is known as 반말, so literally half speech. Casual speech is used when you're not showing extra respect towards someone who you are speaking to. Again, this is not related to who you're speaking about. Also note that casual speech is not rude in itself, but simply does not show any extra respect. When used appropriately, casual speech can have a friendly feel. So let's talk a bit about how you can make casual speech. The most basic way to make casual speech is you simply conjugate a verb as normal without adding the 요 to the end. So here's how that works. The verb 하다 could become 해, 먹다 could become 먹어, and 춥다 would become 추워. Since casual speech does not show any extra respect toward the person you're speaking to, you also won't use honorific speech or humble speech about that person. However, you can use honorific speech and humble speech when talking about someone else as usual. Here are two example sentences that use casual speech. 선생님이 여기 안 계셔. The teacher isn't here. This one uses the honorific verb 계시다. 선생님께 선물 드렸어. I gave a present to the teacher. This sentence uses the humble verb 드리다. The verbs 이다 and 아니다, however, meaning to be and to not be, conjugate uniquely in casual speech. First, here is 이다. This will become 야 after a vowel or 이야 after a consonant. For example, 학교 would become 학교야, and 집 would become 집이야. Next, here's how to conjugate 아니다. This will just become 아니야. For example, 그런 문제가 아니야. It's not that kind of problem. Also note that the future tense 것이다 ending will become 거야 or 것이야 in casual speech. For example, 내일 할 거야. I'll do it tomorrow. So, we've covered basically how to make casual speech. When do you use it? Well, there are a lot of situations where you'll want to use casual speech. Here are some of the most common situations that you'll find. With close friends who are the same age as you or younger, to partners, such as your boyfriend or girlfriend, etc., towards small children, among family members, toward animals, when talking to yourself, and with permission, when someone else gives you permission to speak casually. Note that you can actually use several different grammar forms when talking to yourself, and we'll learn about these in detail in a later lesson. One of the most common places you're going to use casual speech is with your close friends. Specifically, this will be your close friends who are also the same age as you or younger. For example, high school classmates can use casual speech to each other, as they're all in the same grade, therefore the same age, and all study together. However, simply being older than someone else is not always a good reason to use casual speech. And this is important because casual speech conveys the feel of, I do not consider that I need to be polite toward you. Note that using casual speech to older friends should only be done with permission, or else it can actually be rude. And we'll learn about how to ask for as well as offer permission to speak casually in a later lesson. Next, most couples, whether dating or married, will also use casual speech with each other regardless of their age. This is because casual speech conveys that both people are on the same level or rank, and that neither needs to be more polite toward the other. However, some couples may still feel more comfortable when the younger person speaks politely to the older person, such as with the 요 form. Note that this is less common. And it's also acceptable to use casual speech towards small children, even from the very first time that you meet them. However, it's not required that you use casual speech. You can also speak politely, for example, using the 요 form, if you want to talk to them as if they were a bit older. In fact, some parents may also speak this way to their own children. In addition, although it's acceptable to speak casually towards someone who's obviously a young child, use your best judgment for anyone older than a teenager, and speak politely to be safe. Note that if you choose to speak politely to a child, avoid any formal speech or using honorific speech and humble speech when speaking about them. For example, it would be awkward to ask a child, 뭐 하고 있습니까? What are you doing? An exception would be if it's obvious that you're joking. In addition, most direct family members will also use casual speech with each other, and even kids, when they get a bit older, can start using casual speech with their parents. This will typically be once a child reaches adulthood. However, when speaking to older family members, specifically like grandparents, or family members who you're not close with, such as relatives, speak politely. Most parents will actually require their younger children to always speak politely to them, at least using the yo form, as practice for interacting with other people. In addition, some children will continue speaking politely toward their parents even into adulthood, or they might mix their casual speech with polite speech. It is not required to speak casually toward your parents. Note that it's best to speak politely toward parents-in-law. Once you become well acquainted, it may be acceptable to speak less carefully and formally, for example by using fewer honorifics. However, you should still avoid using casual speech toward your parents-in-law. Next, we have animals. In fact, it is only acceptable to use casual speech when talking to an animal, so someone's pet. Showing extra respect toward an animal, like someone's pet, and then using that same level of respect toward the owner would be putting them both on the same level. For the same reason, avoid using any honorific speech or humble speech when talking about the animal. For example, it would sound awkward to say, 바둑이한테 밥을 드렸어요. So I fed the dog 바둑. When talking to yourself, there's no need to be extra polite, so you wouldn't use honorific speech or humble speech. Instead, you can use casual speech. It would actually sound awkward if you were to use the yo form when talking to yourself. For example, if you feel cold, you can say out loud to yourself, 추워, it's so cold. Saying 추워요 or 춥습니다 to yourself would sound awkward. Again, this is when you're speaking to yourself, not when you're directing your words at someone else. And we'll learn about how you can speak to yourself in detail using various other forms in a later lesson. Okay, so let's do a listening practice using some of the concepts that we've learned here. A man is walking his dog and a girl runs up to say hi. So first, 슬기 says, 어머, 너 예쁘다. Oh my, you're so pretty. Talking to the dog. 강아지 이름이 뭐예요? What's the dog's name? Here, talking to the owner, 진수, who replies, 번개예요. It's 번개, meaning lightning. 번개 쓰다듬어 봐도 돼요? Is it okay if I pet lightning? 네, 괜찮아요. Yes, it's okay.
어머, 너 예쁘다. 강아지 이름이 뭐예요?
번개예요.
번개 쓰다듬어 봐도 돼요?
네, 괜찮아요.
Before we go on to some notes, try taking this quick quiz on your own. You can pause the video here and resume it when you're ready for the answers. Here are the answers. The first question is true. Using casual speech does not show any extra respect toward the person you're talking to. Next, false. You can use casual speech to any coworkers as they are of the same rank as you. This would likely be impolite. And for the conjugations in casual speech, 먹다 becomes 먹어, 어렵다 becomes 어려워, 있다 becomes 있어, 드리다 becomes 드려, and 주시다 becomes 주셔. Remember that casual speech conveys the feel of, I do not consider that I need to be polite toward you. Therefore, be careful not to use casual speech when you're meeting someone for the first time, as it can be rude to express this. For example, instead of saying 반가워, use 반갑습니다 or 반가워요. Also note, the word 친구, meaning friend, is most often, but not always, used to mean a friend who is the same age as you. Again, Korean age. For friends who are older, consider using the family terms 형, 오빠, 누나, and 언니. You may also add 친한, meaning close, before any family term, if you want to emphasize that you're close friends and not just friends. When you need to specify a 형, 오빠, 누나, or 언니 is your actual family member and not just a friend, you can also optionally attach 친 before the family term. For example, 친형 would be your actual older brother. So in this lesson, we had a brief overview of casual speech, and next lesson we'll talk more about how you can make it and use it. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you again in the next lesson. 그럼 다음에 또 봐!